Hey there! Welcome to Shift, everybody. We're super glad to be back in person, and I hope you had a long, amazing, relaxing weekend. But now we're back, so come on. If this is your first time here, you can scan this QR code, and if you fill out the Connect card, we'll send you some free Opus coffee. Today is our all church update. After service, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about all things Shift, updating you guys, and everyone is welcome to attend, or not, if you don't want to, because that's how we roll. First intergroup is this month on June 24th at Curia on the Drag at 5 p.m. You can eat there, or you can bring your own food. It's going to be a phantasmagorical time, super fun, so put it in your phones, because we all know that you'll forget it if you don't. And you can RSVP here today. On June 7th, the first episode of Shift Happens podcast will be live, which is also the first day that Taylor Swift's new album comes out, just in case you're a Swiftie fan. Each episode will tell the story of someone marginalized by the church and how they found peace and healing in and outside of the church. The stories will challenge and encourage you, and it's going to be out on all platforms, so make sure you go subscribe and give it a rating and spread the word. That's it. Now we get to kick off our series, Free Hugs.
So I was a child of the 80s, and it was an awesome decade to grow up in. The music was amazing. Excuse me. Please forgive me my faux pas. The music is amazing. And we had the absolute best Saturday mornings, all right? I would get up early. I would run downstairs. I'd pour myself a big bowl of something like Count Chocula or Fruity Pebbles. I don't know what that is. Or Fruity Pebbles. And then I would run to the TV and I would turn it on, and I would watch my favorite toys come to life. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. G.I. Joe, the Transformers, the Smurfs, Thundercats, He-Man, the Littles, Voltron, Ninja Turtles, just to name a few. And then it was time to play. So I would jump on my bike and I would ride down to my friend Mike or Chris's house, and we would play all morning until we were hungry. And then you would go home to eat, or one of the parents would feed all of us. And then we would go back out to play, jump on our bikes, and we'd go back out to play. And then when we got hungry, it was dinner time. So we would go home, we would grab a bite to eat, and then back out to play. When the street lights came on, that meant it was time to go home, and we would ride our bikes home, completely exhausted and utterly filthy, right? We took family vacations in our station wagon. Yes, we had a station wagon. And yes, my brother and I sat in the back with all the luggage unbuckled. I read Mad and Cracked magazine like it was going out of style. Because we lived in St. Louis, we went to a ton of Cardinal games. What is that? Do you guys hear that like thump? We lived in St. Louis at the time. So what my dad and I would do, or my brother and I would do, we would go down to early, because the players at that time would walk to the stadium from the hotel. So we would go down a few hours early, and we would meet the ball players, and we would get all of these autographs. It was amazing. They absolutely don't do that anymore. But it was a ton of fun. Friday nights were pizza and movie nights, and we would go across the street. It was just almost right across the street where the movie rental place was, and we would get movies. And when I was really young, VCRs weren't out in the stores yet, so you would rent a VCR and bring it back. And I grew up watching movies like Ghostbusters and Airplane, Star Wars, The Money Pit. Tom Hanks was hilarious. Ernest Goes to Camp. Anybody? Ernest movies? They were fantastic. And occasionally I would sneak in movies that I wasn't allowed to watch, like Night of the Living Dead or Nightmare on Elm Street, which was terrifying at the time. I had the absolute best childhood, all right? To me, it was perfect. There's not a thing that I would change. I spent those formative years with a group of kids, awesome group of kids playing whatever we wanted without a care in the world. We were totally and completely uninformed about the larger world around us. That's not to say that every now and then something wouldn't sneak into our little bubble, right? For example, I can remember the assassination attempt on President Reagan at the time. I remember sitting in class and watching the Space Shuttle Challenger explode. In 1983, there was this movie that came out called The Day After. Does anybody remember that? The TV movie about nuclear war. The Soviet Union launched nukes, the Americans launched nukes, and then everything was annihilated. And I can vividly remember that, which made the drills that we had to do in school like all the more real, where they would do these drills where we would get underneath the school desks in case of a nuclear attack. I still don't know what that's going to do, right? I don't know how those desks were going to protect us, but we were kids. What did we know, right? Okay, get under the desk. Then in 1984, a young boy by the name of Ryan White contracted something called HIV/AIDS through a blood transfusion that he was getting because he was a hemophiliac. That was the first time that I had ever heard that term, and it was during those days in the mid to late 80s that I began hearing about something called the gay cancer. And I started hearing about how God was punishing this group of people for choosing a lifestyle that God hated. I didn't know anybody gay growing up. And as a matter of fact, in my part of the world, derogatory words were used to describe gay people, even though at the time I literally had no idea what that meant, right? And if somebody called you one of those terms, it was fighting words. And I can remember I started hearing people preaching about this from churches, from Sunday mornings and on TVs about this stuff, and words like reprobate and evil and mental illness and abomination were associated with it. And because they either choose to do this thing or they have this thing, the preachers said that they weren't going to heaven. And as a child, being indoctrinated into the idea that a loving God would torture people for all eternity, it all lined up, right? God says this thing is evil and don't do that thing. But this group of people decide to do this thing, and God is punishing them to try to get them to stop doing this thing, but they won't, and God's not sending them to hell. They are choosing to go to hell. Now, why would anybody actively do that, right? Well, the answer that I got was something called the gay agenda. And the gay agenda was about destroying America, destroying Christianity, freedom, and family, and God's natural order. Now, growing up in the evangelical church, that made perfect sense. They were being used by the devil to bring about our downfall. It was all part of Satan's plan to attack God's people. We were the victims. We were the victims. It wasn't the hundreds of thousands of people dying from this wretched disease or the millions that were harmed by it. It was us, the majority white Christian culture. We were the real victims. Those people dying horrible deaths and being ostracized by the community at large, they were getting what they deserved because they chose the gay agenda over God's. Welcome to Shift. Happy Sunday, huh? If you don't know, my name is Joe. I am the lead pastor here, and we are kicking off this new series called Free Hugs. And I'm very excited about this series. Next week, we have a few special guests that are going to be with us. They're going to be part of a panel discussion, and we're going to get real about their stories. We're going to get real about faith and about the current state of things. And then we've got Father's Day, and then on June 25th, my friend Tamara Perry Lunardo is going to be speaking about what the church can do and be going forward. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm not the type of pastor or person that's going to be like, you can't miss this series. God's going to do something special, right? Like, I just don't do that. But you can't miss this series because God is going to do something special, okay? I'm kidding. But I do want to encourage you guys that whether you're in person or you're going to be online, to make sure that you follow along, because each week I think that these are going to be super impactful for everybody that's a part of it. Now, a little over a year ago, we got invited to be part of something called the We Say Gainesville Rally. It was in response to some of the legislation that was coming out of Tallahassee, and we as a church had just officially made the move to become an open and affirming space. And I have spent most of my career
as a non-affirming pastor. So when they invited me to speak, I thought, what in the world am I going to say? Like, I didn't think, honestly, that I had earned the right to be up there at all. But I was invited and encouraged to do so, partly because of those things. So I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say. But I remembered back to those days that I was just describing a few moments ago, and I remember being taught about this thing called the gay agenda and how nefarious it sounded and how this group of people would bring about the downfall of America. Now, the funny thing is that that wasn't my experience at all. Like, not with our queer friends before, and certainly not during or after. The worst reaction that we were met with as an organization when we came out as open and affirming was, by the local queer community, was cautious optimism. That was the worst reaction we got. So I did the only thing that I felt qualified to do at the time, and it was apologize. So that's what I did. I apologized for believing all those things. I apologized for propping those things up. I apologized for being part of systems that were built on those things. And after I walked off the stage for those few minutes, do you know what I was met with? Hope. Hope. Hope that things could be better. Hope that if a straight, white, Christian, evangelical pastor could see the error in his ways, then others could too. And I was met with that, not because of some rousing or amazing speech that I gave, but simply because somebody like me was there. And hope is a strange thing. You can't feel it. You can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't grab hope and be like, see, I got this thing, right? But hope is powerful. It topples regimes. It can change the course of history. People have laid down their lives, simply given up everything for the hope of a better world. And people have laid down all of it for the greater unknown. And the early church leader, Paul, knew this. Like, he felt this. Listen to his words written to a church long ago in ancient Rome. It's Romans 8:18 through 25, so follow along. I got it up here for you. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, and hope that the creation itself will be set free from its enslavement to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. I'll explain it. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what one already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So this says that the world is not as it should be and needs to change. And Paul places suffering and hope next to each other on purpose as a critique. The world is this way, right? But it should be this way. Yes, there's suffering in the world. Yes, there is real harm being done to people, but we have hope. Hope that we can make the world a different place, that we can envision the world as it could be. And all of creation feels this as if it were in the pains of childbirth. Now, if you look at the phrase, waits with eager longing, all right, it means continuous, active, expectant hope. And the Greek word for waiting is apodekomai, okay? And it's in the middle mood. I'm going to nerd out for just a second. It's in the middle mood, which means that creation is acting and also receiving the benefit of that action. In other words, our hope creates more hope. And I think the wisdom that we find here is the encouragement that when we participate in this, along with the whole of creation, we also receive the benefit of the action. Which means that when we, humanity, that we only receive the benefits of this waiting with eager longing if we are participating in bringing about this hope of the way the world should be. Look at every action, or look at every interaction that Jesus had with people. The woman at the well. Zacchaeus, the tax collector. All of those that he ate and hung out with, those of ill repute, the sinners, if you will. every time Jesus interacted with one of these people, they walked away changed. And I'm convinced, absolutely convinced, that they walked away changed because they were met with hope. They felt that hope. Jesus saw the way the world should be. He talked about the way the world could be, right? And he treated them as if this hopeful reality was already, in fact, reality. They were changed because hope made them feel alive, and hope made them feel as if they were who they were created to be. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the people that Jesus interacted with that were satisfied with the status quo, they were satisfied, they were okay with the way the world was, like the religious leaders, right? The people in positions of power. They hated Jesus. Have you ever thought about why? Like, really why? I know pastors and sermons that talk about, well, he's the love of God and blah, 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 and they hate him, they crucify. No. Have you ever really thought, do you really think that the Roman authorities, the Roman government, would execute somebody that was preaching, love your neighbor as yourself? Do you think they cared that he said that the greatest commandment was love God and love others? Or to treat others like you want to be treated? Do you really think that the government cared about that? I don't think so at all. I think that they killed him because he dared show people the way the world should be. A world without lines that creates us and them. A world without greed and famine. A world where all people are seen and treated as image bearers of the divine. That's why they hated him, and that's why they killed him, because he threatened their system. Because he showed us all a way of hope. Now, last week, Tori and I, we went to Texas to celebrate our niece's graduation. And while we were there, Tori and her two sisters decided to kind of like spend some time alone. It'd been 5 years since all of us had been together, so they just wanted to go out, the three of them, and hang out. And while they were running around, they decided to make a Target run. And they went to Target, and like all good white basic girls do, they went to Target and they were doing the Starbucks thing and all the stuff. And Tori saw in the dollar section this little rainbow scrunchie, and so she grabbed it, part of her stuff. And so she went to buy it at the self-checkout, but it wouldn't scan. And so, an associate came over and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't sell this stuff. We have to send it all back to the vendor." And Tori is not a confrontational person at all, but she wanted to kind of like, hey, this is my experience. So she made a little TikTok about it, just kind of expressing her disappointment in Target, but also in the people that were threatening violence. That's why Target was responding over clothing, which is really silly to me. Like, if you're going to get that upset about something, how about kids dying in our schools or at malls or something? I've never been shot at by a T-shirt. I'm just saying. But one of the responses that was sent to Tori said this. It makes me sad and disappointed that you guys have used Shift as a platform for leftist political agendas. Shift has always been about loving everyone, everyone's in capital letters, in our community. You don't need to cram rainbows down everybody's throat. It's exhausting. We get the point. How dare we participate in the hope of Jesus? How dare we hope that all people, including queer people, are worthy of inclusion? How dare we dream of a tomorrow where loving people, of merely acknowledging somebody's existence, isn't seen as a political agenda, but seen as simply loving your neighbor as yourself? How dare we have the audacity of hope? I'm not sorry for any of it. I don't care how it's seen. I don't care how it's interpreted by those that are satisfied with the status quo. I don't care how it makes the privileged feel. I refuse, hear me when I say this, I refuse to be the religious leaders that walk on the other side of the road when they saw a person, a human being, beaten, robbed, and left for dead. I will be the hated Samaritan that saw a human being in need and treated them as such, and I refuse to pastor a church that isn't willing to do the same. Let us never be silent. Let us be loud with hope. Let us be loud with love. When things feel the darkest, that must be when we're the loudest. We have to overflow with this hope. Listen to what that same author, Paul, says in this same letter to that ancient church in Rome, Romans 15:13. He says this, "Oh, may the God of great hope fill you up with joy, fill you up with peace, so that your believing lives, filled with this life-giving energy of the Holy Spirit, will brim over with hope." Make no mistake, we are in the new Jim Crow South. And maybe that's the reason that we're here. Maybe that's why we survived when so many others didn't as a church. Maybe we were made for this time and this place. If I'm honest, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Because I won't fairy tale us. But I'm going to live like it's true. I'm going to pastor shift like that's true. And I want to invite you to be a part of that like it's true. Now, that was a lot. And I usually don't get that worked up. So what do I want to do? Yes, I want to bring it back in, all right? I want to bring that back in and turn that temperature down just a little bit. So I understand that we are not a monolith, right? That we have unity but not uniformity. And that is a very good thing. For some, this talk is inspiring, motivating. For others, it's challenging, and that's okay. What I want to do this morning is I want to contemplate our whys. Why is it inspiring, or why is it challenging? What preconceived notions do we bring into this space, and are they healthy? Are they Christ-like? So what I want to do is I want to ask some questions to help guide you through that process. And at the end, I'm going to pray, and afterward, we're for anyone willing, we'll take communion. And these small symbols are a reminder of that hope that Jesus lived and died for. A hope that we are now called to live and bring to the world around us. That we be that life-giving force called to live out that joy and peace. So if the band, if you guys want to go ahead and come on up, and we'll turn down the lights. Not for some, we're not going to do, for those that are new, we're not going to do like a come forward invitation, but we simply do that so it's not an awkward moment of silence. Yeah, you can go ahead and do that. So here's my first question for you. How are we feeling in this moment? How are you feeling right now? Like, check back in with yourself. And then the question I have to follow it up is, why are you feeling that way? How are you feeling right now? And why are you feeling that way? What is God saying to you right now? What things are coming to mind? The last question I have for you is this. What is one realistic way, and I say realistic on purpose, what is one realistic way that you can bring hope to your part of Gainesville? Now, before I pray, we've had some people in recent weeks ask about what it means to follow the way of Jesus, what that actually looks like. And I want to offer something to you all for anyone questioning that, either for the first time or maybe you grew up in church like I did, all right? And you're discovering that following Jesus isn't what they told us it was, right? If that's you, then I want to invite you to reach out to me, all right? Reach out to me this week sometime. I would absolutely love to meet you for coffee or lunch or a drink or whatever and sit down and talk about what that looks like. Not that I have all the answers. I'm figuring out myself, but I'd love to help you figure that out as well. Let's pray. God of great hope, fill us up. Give us more and more of this life-giving hope. I pray that it spills over into our homes and families and friends and neighborhoods. I pray that it fills us with joy and that it becomes contagious. I ask that we would live out this hope in such a way that it brings life and good fruit to our city. God, I don't know or pretend to understand how you move or work, but I know how we do. So I ask that you remind us to pray like it depends on you and work like it depends on us. Thank you for the hope that we find in your life, your teachings, and your resurrection. In your name we pray. Amen.